I'll get started. Let me speak to Jen.
There's Jen. Oh, there's Jen.
Oh, that's interesting. I've seen more. Oh.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the Ops Area Working Group and the joint Ops Area. We have got a packed agenda today, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Note Well. I assume this is not the first day, so you've probably all seen it. This is more on the technical side, covering how your participation and contributions at the IETF are handled. Hopefully you have read it and you understand what it means to come to the mic, what it means to offer a contribution and do so as an individual. And of course, things about intellectual property and things of that nature. But be also very, very aware that this is an organization of respect. And we, fortunately, in this working group, been pretty good, I think, on this. But it is an individual thing. So if we ask that you treat everyone with respect, that you focus on the technical, we can have good debates on that. But again, respect. And if you do feel that there's something amiss, there are outlets, the Ombuds team, and so on, that you can pursue to sort those issues out. Everything is being recorded, as it said on the first slide, and on this slide, we use Meet Echo here. Hopefully you've all had some chance to get familiar with that. We use that for joining the queue, the mic queue, both here in the room and remote. If you have not already scanned one of those QR codes, either at the poster at the back or at the mic stand, please do so. That's your blue sheet that says you are in this meeting. And before you go to the mic, please raise your hand in that tool. If you are joining on the full meeting interface in Meet Echo, please just mute so we don't have feedback. And this one, agenda, hopefully you've seen it. We made a few changes online. We'll talk a little bit about the sorting around that's happened. If there's any technical issues, there's a link there on how to report them. I am Joe Clark. You probably have seen me before if you've been here. I have the privilege of training this newbie over here. My new chair, his name is, I think it's pronounced Benoit, I think. Benoit Claes. Thank you, Benoit, for agreeing to be my co-chair. It's great to be working with you again. And we'd like to thank Hank for all his work in Ops Area Working Group as the outgoing chair here at Ops AWG. So thank you, Hank, and welcome, Benoit.
Thank you.
I don't see Rob yet, but oh, Rob Wills is here. I did promise Wilton that I would, there he is. I would take notes in green and he would take notes. We have Jean, we have Rob Wills, and we have Rob Wilton who will take minutes and hopefully watch the Jabber or the Meet Echo chat and anything that we need to bring to the mic, we will. I have pasted the agenda into the hedge doc, the notes interface, so hopefully it's fairly easy to add stuff to it. The meeting materials is up to date, and we will go through some of our updates. Real quick, we do have a few documents that are in last call and will progress. If you have any interest in becoming a shepherd, it's a great way to get a wee bit more involved in the IETF. I would encourage you to seek Benoit or I out. We would love to make make you a shepherd on one of the documents. Also, if you want a little bit more exposure and you feel like you really like to read documents as with an operator hat on, seek out Warren or Mahesh, our ADs, and let them know you'd be interested in joining the Ops Directorate. So another great way to participate a little bit more in the IETF. In terms of our status, Benoit pointed out in red over there on the right, we've been making some really good progress. We had one new RFC published. Thank you to the authors for finding and using geofeed data. That's evolved. That's a product of a BIS document. So we really like the fact that we're getting kind of operational feedback and we're evolving some of those standards. We have a few documents in the RFC editor queue. Most of them are in an edit state. They're progressing. The last one there is in a missing reference, so it's waiting on another document to progress before it will progress. And the authors, Med is one in particular, has been very responsive on these. So we are grateful to all the authors and the ADs and the RFC editor. We do have a few that are working their way through the AD/author process. They're submitted to the IESG, and again, different states, the authors are being fairly responsive. Many of the, or some, I should say, some of the documents that are still in working group draft status we'll hear from today, but we do have a few updates. Well, actually, I'll come back to this slide real quick. I'll talk about TACX as a very specific document, single document. Alan, I see you in the back. Thank you for your recent reply on the list. We are pending another revision from the authors, but they've been very responsive. Med is the shepherd on this document, and it is moving quite nicely. We expect to see after 121 an update to that. Benoit, you want to talk a little to this one?
Right. So looking at a charter, it has been there for a while. I still see in there that we are doing MIP modules. I still see in there that the latest milestone is from 2013. I still see in there that the list of current activities is completely old, let's put it this way. So what we're going to do is, based on my feedback, is that we're going to update it, right? So one update for what I just said, and also something which is not specific for this charter, but the MUD work. And I believe we have 3 documents right now. We're going to finish those in this working group, but there is like an update of the IoT Ops working group where future MUD-related work will go. So right now, I believe that the charter is being updated. It's going to go through the process, but this is the intention from the ADs that future MUD work goes to IoT Ops. So to come back to the Observatory Charter, we'll start the work soon, for the addition of soon.
Thanks. 2 other things. We have one document in working group last call that will close on the characterization of OAM. There's been some feedback on list, and the authors said that they will follow up with that. So our plan is to close that last call, let the authors sort through the feedback, come back on list, and if we need to, we can make another last call there. And then we have, sorry.
Just one more thing. I'm not sure if you paying specific attention to the MUD documents, but one of the documents disappeared from a list of documents because it was in a state called dead. So there was a glitch in the process, whatever. It's back alive, and the onus is on Mahesh to review the new version of the draft.
We have this update on a recently adopted working group document. I don't know if we want to talk to this or Giuseppe, real quick.
Yeah, this is to summarize. This document requests IANA to create a new prefix registry to specify new information elements for the alternate marking export. The new version addresses the comment received from Med. Let me also thank you, Med, for the thoughtful review. In few words, we clarify the operation mode, and basically the document adds new information elements, the flow mon ID, loss flag, delay flag, and period number. For who is familiar with alternate marking can understand these fields. Other existing fields are source address, destination address, protocol, and ports for flow identification. In these days, I also received another offline review from Paul Aitken, and I will plan to address in soon. Next step will be to move this work forward with the other companion documents in IPPM, so the deployment draft and the Yang model, since we are building all the framework with the Yang model for configuration and IPFix for export. So that's all.
Thanks, Giuseppe.
Thank you.
And with that, into the agenda portion, we will have the PCAP last in Ops Area Working Group because Michael had a conflict, but we will be hearing first from some adopted work. Then we will hear from some other contributed work. The rest of it has been published for a while. Then we'll move into the Ops Area section at the end, where we'll get a NIMOps update and some open mic time. Any bashing of the agenda? All right. Well, then let's get to our first presenter, if we could. This is on packet discard. And we ask all the presenters to please keep to their time. We have a very packed agenda and try to focus on the discussion you want to have. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. Oh, thank you. So we're on version 4 of the draft. In the, I think it was the last meeting, we changed the way that we expressed the information model, and we moved to a Yang-based information model. So I know there's some discussion around this. I'm sure we'll have discussion, further discussion on it. Many different ways we can express the information model. Medtodest suggested using the RFC 8791 extensions in order to do that. And that actually, for us in expressing the requirements for reporting discard data, it was probably the best approach for 3 reasons. One, we could do it using the RFC 8791 extensions. We could actually express the information model abstract from implementation. 2, it allows for a lossless transformation to a data model if you wish to do that. And the third is everybody understands it. And as soon as we expressed it in any other way, it wasn't generally understood. I think the discussion point there is really the nuance between a Yang-based information model versus a Yang-based data model, and I think we'll come to that at the end of the presentation. We went through the first feedback from Yang doctors. We addressed that. Part of that was just how the module was defined, and part of that was actually what expressing why we used Yang to represent the information model. What I was going to focus the discussion on was the challenges that we had in doing the modeling and why we've ended up where we have with how the model is. There is the model expressed in version 4, and we've got an update to that, which we'll talk about here. Challenge we had is that we've got when we have packet discards, they can be associated with different entities. With an interface which can be directional. In some cases, it may be associated with the device where it's lost any understanding of interface and direction. It can be associated with the control packets to and from the control plane, and it can be associated with flow. So the challenge was we've got directionality in there, and we've got layer in there. So the challenge was, can we express an information model that is extensible to representing packet discards in all these contexts? I think the version that's in the draft currently published is not. The version that we're working on, which we reference later in this, which we'd anticipate for the next version, is. We believe it is. So, and apologies, this is an eye chart. This is part of the tree structure, taken the leaves out to try and make it less of an eye chart, but it's still an eye chart. I apologize for that. The key point I want to make here is this is how we apply the information model to an interface. And What you'll see when I go to device is it's almost exactly the same, but we've parameterized direction. Previously, that was actually part of the tree. Now we've broken that out, and that's enabled us to be able to apply the same approach to make it extensible to interface device control plane. Other than that, the underlying structure here hasn't changed, but that has enabled us to take the same approach and then apply that to device. At the device level, you may not have all of those discards, all of those discard parameters, but there's the potential to do that. Then we have control plane. Subset, really from a control plane perspective, we're not interested in that level of detail. We're interested in explicitly, are we dropping packets to or from the control plane? And is that because of policy or another reason? And then lastly, you can we can take the same concept and apply it to flow. And I know this is going to be part of the next discussion. So this, as we've defined it, is an information model. It is not bound to an implementation. We could transform this. If we take the interface case and the device case, control plane case, we could transform this into a data model very straightforwardly and expose that data. Less easy to do that for flow, obviously. One way that we could transform this is if we were to take the RFC 7270 traffic status. Is that the right one? Forwarding status. If we were to take the leaves of this and index them, we could, for example, update the forwarding status in order to be able to capture the same information model expressed as a different data model. So that's where we've got to. The updated model is available on GitHub. It's not in the latest draft. We plan to do another iteration around this before updating to a 0.5 draft. And I think, Benoit, you've got specific questions around the nuance between information model, data model in Yang, the boundary between those, and is this really a data model, and should we just define this as a data model, or is there value in expressing it as an information model?
Right, so let me clarify the feedback that I sent to the mailing list. So you're doing an information model, fine. You want to use Yang to express it, fine. Now, here is the thing. Typically with Yang, people believe that they've got an API to a router, to a controller. You don't have that, right? But my question is, are you going to manipulate the structure of data in whatever form, let's say in a data collection system in the future? If the answer is yes, then the data model makes sense. Where I was confused is that if you say it's an information model, but you still request IANA to have it. And this is where I'm confused, because if you have it in IANA, it means that people will expect tooling to work with that. So they will expect that you will manipulate the data. So there is like, what do you want? Pure information model, and then you don't register in IANA? Or actually you're going to manipulate the data? But I believe that if you do this information model, is that in the end, you're going to manipulate the data. So you want to validate them. So you want the Yang model, so it must be in IANA. So you're doing information model and data model. So let's discuss.
So Mahesh, could you scroll back, I think, to the first information tree diagram? Yeah, so the interface, and actually to Benoit's point, I think we generally, at least in the working group, we don't spend too much time on information model. What we try to standardize is data models. So I think if that's your intended goal, I would say work towards a data model. But I was kind of interested in, you have defined direction as an identity ref, which is fine, except that I think if it's a key in your ability of keeping stats, because I assume you want to keep track of discards both in the ingress and egress direction, then it can't be just a leaf. I think you need it to be the key in your information under the interface, because you want to be able to tabulate the difference between ingress traffic versus egress traffic.
Yeah, and we struggle with that because we do want to do that, but we also want to try and maintain commonality across interface devices. But and some of those things also don't have direction. So I think we're kind of getting to the crux of probably the discussion here, because if we define a fully prescribed data model, we would, we could address that, which is perhaps part of the point we're struggling with.
Rob Wilton, I just regard that an information model is like a poor man's data model. As in, I think data models are just better because they have more information. You can always take a data model and say, and use this for the information purpose. So I would encourage you to go down the route of actually trying to define the data model and make that work. I understand the flow case is sort of a bit tricky.
Yeah.
And then put some pros in the text about how you can use this data model for doing informational stuff as well. But then I think you sort of have every base covered. I think it's really good to get this sort of commonality and these stats coming out here. One, and I can't remember, I haven't read the latest version of the draft, I think about is looking at something like the open config ones. Some of the stuff that they're doing is like pulling out hardware error counters and things like that. So you can still sort of characterize in these sort of general cases, but still be able to pull out the details. So I think that might be worth thinking about, or maybe decide that that's out of scope in terms of what you're trying to do here. Don't know.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Matt, did you have?
Jeff?
Good morning. So unfortunately, this conversation may be prompted to some extent by me leading John down a false set of roads, although this is not terribly surprising. So Benoit, just sort of addressing your point, why are we doing all this stuff for a information model? Why is this IANA? The question here is, to some extent, is this going to be published, and at what level do we maintain it over the long term? The long-term goal, I think, here, those conversations we had with John when we started the work off, is that if we're going to be doing many manifestations of this behavior, whether it's going to be a Yang model that's tied to a router's routing engine, to its line cards, is it manifesting as IPFix, pick whatever the manifestation is, there's going to be a desire to get the information largely the same structure, within whatever level of reason is possible inside of the manifestation. So the challenge becomes within IETF process, how do we do this sort of initial coordination effort? And step one, going to a information model gave us a chance to have a conversation about what's in here. What are the contents? How does it manifest? How does it actually tie into the various structures? And clearly the next conversation has to be, how do we actually start manifesting this as data models? And what I'm hearing at the microphone is that everybody is like, you're spending too much energy on something that we are not necessarily happy about maintaining in Yang right now. So maybe a long-term question for the ops working groups is discussing for information modeling, if we wanted to have a long-term life, whether it's published in RFC or not, how are we going to do that? Yang is not a terrible tool for it, but maintenance of the thing, the IANA maintenance of it is a little strange, as you're sort of noting. So what I suggest as conversation for the chairs of the working group is two things. Number one, do we have a level of success in terms of the information model, in terms of we have the right structure? Are we ready to start kicking out data models for the various manifestations? And the second conversation is that long-term one, if information models are a desirable thing to publish as a long-term maintainable thing, and since there is very likely going to be more than one manifestation of this, some way of tying together the commonality of it, I think, is still a useful thing to have. What does that look like in IETF?
Thanks, Jeff. Matt, did you?
All right. Thank you for the feedback.
And keep it on going on the list. There's clearly interest, and there's more in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, so I'm Jean Kilboeuf. Thank you. So I'm going to present the updates on the data manifest for the telemetry. So to quickly recall the context of this draft, the goal is when you collect the data to keep the information about how the data was collected, so that when you come back to this data later on, you can understand and fully exploit it. So our proposal is to have two manifests. The first one is about the platform, so the device, which normally does not change too often because it will change when you do a software update of the device. And the second one is about the data collection, which will change whenever you change your subscriptions, or maybe sometimes it could change dynamically. For instance, if the device is saying, I can't, you're asking me some updates too frequently and I can't do it, so I will reduce the cadency. So the goal is that these manifests are stored with the data so that they can be exploited later. So the changes, so before we were based on some draft that was proposing to include young schema, and we removed that dependency completely. So now we are using schema mount. So the consequence of that is that not only do we have the young module with the point where we are putting the schema mount, but we also put in the draft the whole list of modules that have to be mounted at this point, which must be the same in every case. And we also did the link with the inventory and digital map. So now we're aligned with this draft, and we're explaining how this ID, the platform ID that we have in our draft, should be linked to this other draft. So I think we had some open questions. So for instance, the one about the deletion and the absence of value. So basically, if we are missing some point in the collection, it's not something that we can solve with the manifest. It's something that we can solve by somehow assuring that the collection system is correct. So for instance, we could use SANE, but I think that it's out of scope of this draft to be able to detect whenever there is an issue with the collection. Is more to give the context for later about what the context was whenever the data was collected. And the interaction with the SBOM effort. So this document is a manifest, but is not really a manifest in the sense that is listing whatever is on the platform. So I think that the security part is out of scope for this draft. So this question is, I think, closed. And so we don't have any open issue left. So I think the draft is ready for the last call. And that's it for me.
Questions? So I have, it's an informative reference on, I guess it's now what, not CMAP, the digital map work, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because I do worry that will take a long time to ratify. There's a lot of complexity in that, but you're just saying could be used as a means for your platform ID.
Yes, basically we are saying specifying this platform ID is out of scope of this draft. We cannot do a refresh because there are several possibilities. So we are just listing the possibilities that exist, and we say that whenever we do that, whenever we implement it, we must make sure that the ID match whatever inventory is used for the system.
Okay. I think we can, I would like to get some feedback on that particular point, but I think we can probably bring it to last call. Other questions? Okay, thanks, Sean.
Thank Thank you.
No, this is IPFix with Dan, right?
Good morning. Okay, so this work has been already presented last time in Brisbane. And since then, we have a couple highlights. First highlight, it's already adopted by the group, by the working group. Second, thanks for Paul for the comment and the reviews. We already have the INA ports for GTPU. And we also added in operational considerations for deployment in the draft. Those are the highlights. We reached out to DMM to let them know about this work, since it's a use case for 5G and 4G type of use case. And we've been reviewing and adding the comment from Mohammed, who's in the room, I guess. Here, we're just going to go over where we added INA ports on the different flags of GTP. Oh, also part of the highlights over the weekend of the hackathon, we've been also developing or deploying a new version of Wireshark. So if you have Wireshark now and you request for upgrade, then you'll see the GTPU now on the wire, which is very helpful because it validates the implementation. That's it. So we think the work is ready for publications. There's one or two things to sort out, but that's pretty much it. Any question or comment?
Yeah, I think we can put this forth. Obviously, these working group last call documents, if anyone is interested in becoming a shepherd for them, please speak up. But thanks, Dan.
So now we've got, this is Victor or Louis? Okay, Louis just entered the room and pointed to Victor. Okay.
Hi, I'm Victor Lopez from Nokia, and I will present the progress on this individual draft that is called a young data model for network diagnosis by scheduling sequences of OEM tests, and easy title as you can see. So let me do a brief recap, since this draft was already presented in Prague in IETF 118 and also in 120. The main use case or the motivation in order to have this work is because OEM is an important part mainly for network operators, and scheduling the test in a network-wide manner is a challenging task, especially because of all the configuration, the life cycle of the OEM test. And the proposal that we are bringing with this draft is to facilitate this process and improve network reliability, having this automated OEM test in the network. The way that we are proposing the work is to reuse already existing young models for devices that are in other RFC's work. And what we are bringing with this document is the concept of a unitary test that is essentially an scheduling capabilities on top of plus these device models in order to do the configuration on the source and destination of the OEM test, plus the concept of an OEM test sequence that essentially will be a group of unitary tests when an operator wants to carry out a certain set of actions in order to do network diagnosis. Which is the incremental work that we've done from the previous O2 version. Based on the feedback that we got in the previous IETF, we've updated the YAN trees and the test state machines. We've improved the wording on some of the use cases because there was some parts that they were not clear. There was also a request in order to add an example of how to use the the draft proposal using a test, and I decided to use a TWAMP test. It is now on the draft, and this is the work that we've done from the previous version. The proposal is the draft is stable. We got positive feedback in the previous IETF. Of course, we are here to request additional reviews and comments, and all collaboration is welcome. And well, we believe that the document is ready for adoption and to keep progressing on the working group. Well, this is essentially what we wanted to present today.
Questions? You want to run a poll of in the room to see who would be interested in working on this? I mean, you've presented it twice now. I think I looked at it back in 118. Are you using the scheduling work that is being put forth in NetMod right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I asked the authors of the inventory draft to separate it, so this way we could use the schedulers as a standalone, and we include it in the, I think it was in the version 0.1.
Okay. Cool. Is this, do people want to work on this? That's probably my brain is not yet fully coffeed this morning. Is there interest in adopting this work? Show of hands. So is the working group, those in the room, those remote, are you interested in adopting this? Yes, no, or no opinion, haven't read it, that type of thing. Obviously, everything will go on list, but just to give Luis and Victor and company just some idea. Okay. So a lot of no opinions, but no no's, and a few yeses. Sure. Is this a good base? I think we'll ask another question then. So we have some time. Is it a good base? Is this document a good basis for scheduling for this work, for scheduling OAM tests? Again, yes, no, no opinion. Probably no opinions, haven't read it. Bless you. Same amount of people, but no no's. So I think there's nothing strongly objecting. We can put this forth and see. I like the fact that you've added the example. We'll see what the list says.
Perfect.
Thank you. Who's next? I think that's Randy.
So Randy, you're next, and I believe we're doing good on time. Thank you. Doesn't mean that you've got more time, Andy, right?
Okie doke. This is Randy from Arcus and IIJ Research. This is actually two drafts done with the suspects below. It's actually originally driven by Oliver, and who, if you remember geoloc, he wants the public's prefix length. So it's like GeoFeed, but the idea is to publish the assignment size an operator has given for a prefix range delegated by the RIR. And then this raised a problem that we're starting to get external references, so we'll generalize it. The initial motivation was that applications that show things to customers, i.e. end users, do block listing and throttling and rate limit captures based on your identity and on your IP space. So for instance, taking the CAPTCHA example, if I show you a CAPTCHA at a particular IP space and you solve it, and I trust your identity, if you ask for something else that needs a capture, I don't have to do it. And this is actually implemented. You may notice that you're getting fewer captures this year than you were last year. Okay. The same thing is if I block a prefix because of spam or whatever, how wide a prefix do I block? If the ISP were to tell me that it's allocating 24s, then I know not to do collateral damage to the next 24. Okay, so like GeoFeed, we have a prefix length CSV file, and it's got the range, the prefix range, and what size you actually allocate within that prefix. So for instance, in 192.0.20, that 24, the ISP allocates single host addresses, 32s. Okay, so we use the same INET hack as GeoFeed did. We call the file prefix-len file. Of course, whois is not going to support that initially. So just like we did with GeoFeed, we'll use the remarks attribute in the INET num class. The files themselves look familiar to you. The pointer from the INET num, and then the file itself is a list of pieces of the prefix. Notice that I was given the /16 by the RIR, but I allocate different parts of it differently. So the prefix-len file tells you that. Some of it's in 24s, some in 27s, etc. As with GeoFeed files, prefix-len files may be signed using the RPKI. Okay, but you can't, if the prefix-len file contains, for instance, IPv4 and IPv6, clearly you can't sign that with RPKI because that has to come from two different RPKI objects, the 6 object and the 4 object. With special case CGNATs, because the consumer, the person, the application using the prefix-len data, that's different than the customer. The customer is the other end of the transaction. It's the provider of the service needs to know that there's a CGNAT there and that there's high granularity and mobility. So for instance, here, there's a CGNAT that's a prefix length of 20, but it's loading every 32, every host address, it's multiplexing 16 times. So it comes up with a prefix len of 36. Okay, so essentially, if you're behind the CGNAT, you're going to keep getting captures. Okay, that's prefix-len. The other graph is xgraph. Because all of a sudden we have GeoFeed and now we're talking about prefix-len, we said, oh my God, they're going to breed. There's going to be more of this stuff. So let's generalize. So let's have, this is still back in the whois, an INET 6 num, and 2 external references for 2 different subtypes, the GeoFeed subtype and the prefix-len subtype. The subtype registry is an IANA registry, and it requires RFC because I can imagine subtypes that are pretty scary. For instance, a subtype that causes you to fetch code. So RFC required for new entries in the registry. Okay. Warning, the webbies are coming. The RIRs are moving from whois to RDAP or want to. So INET NumHacks are going to have to migrate. They already have GeoFeed in their test examples. This will be a long transition. But notice that both GeoFeed and prefix length need bulk fetch, not single fetches like RDAP. Okay, so RDAP replaces whois, not FTP. So this is an ongoing conversation with the registries. Okay, here's an example of their RDAP with an example of both a GeoFeed and a prefix len. Okay, don't ask me to understand it. I mean, I kind of do, but no comment. And every good deed needs to be punished. So people have suggested other attributes like the type of customer. Is it residential? Is it 3G, 42G? What's the bandwidth? And oh, can we have extensible data? To me, these smell like an infinite game. If you can come up with a really short list with rigorous definitions, then I'll take it seriously. But way back 20 years ago, I started a draft to ask for just a very simple labeling on what kind of connection a BGP feeder was giving route views and risk collectors. And my co-author started adding attributes madly. I withdrew from the draft and it was published as RFC 4384. No one has ever used it, right? It's horrible. So be careful of featureitis. So that's why I kind of resist these further attributes, but I'm willing to listen and talk. Okay. And that's all I've got. Questions?
We
Answers?
do. Tobias.
Tobias?
So Tobias Wiebig, Max Planck Institute for Informatics. So two things. First, I see this overlapping with like the assignment and registration principles of the RIRs. So technically, assignments would have to be registered. So in the route region, we now have the aggregated by LIR statuses, which also contain the prefix sizes, which are actually assigned to end users, which to me feels a bit redundant. So question is whether that solution by the RIRs, which also explicitly notifies the end user assigned prefix size, might not be better. And the other concern I have, which is also related to what we see with GeoFeed, what if the LIR setting those things actually just lies? Because that will reduce the usability of these things for example, assessing whether you can do certain blocking on certain prefix sizes.
Thanks.
John?
Hi, John Levine. I think it's really important to do this for IPv6. I've been talking to large mail systems who tell me that the reason they don't do IPv6 is because they don't have this sort of prefix granularity to do their reputations. I have less confidence that the v4 stuff is useful, but it is at worst harmless, and being able to see where the CGNs are might be useful. So I would encourage you to move ahead with the prefix lens stuff, and whether or not you generalize it, I got no opinions about that.
Thanks.
Med, did you want to make any comment? No. Okay. Thank you, Randy. Let's. It sounds like there's worth some discussion on list on this work.
Yeah.
So the next one is SAF-based anti-DDoS architecture.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Min Zhexin from Zhongguan Cun Laboratory. And I'd like to share our drafts about architecture using source address validation devices to mitigate the DDoS attack. I will first give the problem statement and introduce the architecture and workflow of the server. And I will introduce how the data transmits between sub devices and the server controller. Finally, I will present our preliminary experimental results to show the effectiveness of our architecture. Okay, first of all, we all know that the DDoS is still one of the top cyber threats, and spoofing source IP address is commonly used techniques in DDoS attack. Existing detection and defense methods can be divided into 3 categories according to their location. At the target size, the traffic generally much lesser than the such as middleware network. So we can use some precise detection methods such as package level detection. But the limitation is that the scraping resources is relatively weak. Where for the middleware network, they typically use NetFlow-based method to sample flows and conduct the detection algorithms on these flows. So the limitation is that this detection is with low accuracy and timeliness. As for the source side, the source address validation is an effective way to detect the packets with spoofed source addresses. You can discover and block tests at the source side. So what's its limitation? We identify 2 major limitations, and the first is the limited deployment scale. The sub devices can be deployed as access network and the inter and the intra domain. And each of them has their own limitations. For example, the intra domain deployment may be difficult to defend spoofing within the same address prefix. So we need a certain scale of sub development to achieve effective DDoS defense, but unfortunately, the deployment of sub devices is a lengthy process. The second limitation is link collaboration. Existing sub devices directly drop spoofed packets, but they do not share the attack intelligence. So our insight is that this threat data can be collaborated among sub devices. And more specifically, each if sub devices can maintain a database and which stores the spoofed package information, including IP address, port name, and so on. And the threat information sharing should be prioritized instead of direct dropping. And the advantages behind this mechanism is that the sub devices can be aware of the reflection attacks and the direct attacks, and we can more accurately and more earlier to detect potential threats and response to large-scale attacks before forming. And we can also provide a global view of attack situation, which can also benefit the security operation. Okay, this figure presents the overall architecture of the server. It comprises of 3 components. The server device is responsible for monitoring and identifying spoofed packets and upload the information to the server controller. The server controller can collect this information and analyze this information aware of the attack situation, and it can also generate the security intelligence and can distribute the security intelligence to sub devices and non sub devices and victim's defense system, and you can benefit this entire network. As for the workflow, the first step is that the subrouter can record the spoofed packet's information and then report it to the subnet controller. Subnet controller aggregates and analyzes and statistics this collected information and then decides whether if a DDoS attack is positive. After that, based on the attack detection result, the subnet controller can generate specific filtering rules and then distribute these filtering rules to sub-routers and non-sub devices and victims' defense system and can benefit the entire network. As for the information flow, the sub-routers do not directly drop the spoofed sub-packet, but they can be considered as a honeypots, and network deployed with sub-routers can be considered as a honeynet. The subnet controller continues discover the security intelligence and such as the zombie network and new types of attack behaviors and distribute this security intelligence to the devices and benefit the security operation of the whole network. For the data transmission, the subnet devices monitoring messages of the spoofed packets, including source and destination IP address and port number and so on, and then report this information to the subnet controller with DOS or YAM models and or other data models. And the subnet controller can generate some filter rules, including ACR rules or IP blacklisting to non-sub devices. And it can also generate threat information to the victim defense system which boosts their detection speed. We also conduct experiments in a simulation environment. There is a route 2. It first detects the attack and upload the information to the subnet controller, and the subnet controller generated the filtering rules and distributed it to the route 6, and the route 6 execute the blocking. So as we can see at the Mark 4, the legitimate traffic back to normal. We also sample some samples containing both the legitimate traffic and spoofed packets, and we use a very simple statistic-based machine learning method k-means to divide these packets into two categories. And as we can see, we can accurately identify the spoofed packets and with just a manner of false positive. This demonstrated that the proposed subnet architecture can enable the security operators to easily aware of the characteristic of the malicious traffic and the global attack situation. Okay, that's all my on my presentation. It's also worth noting that our subnet architecture is published at the IEEE Internet Computing and received some positive feedback, and our code is also released at GitHub. Thank you.
Questions? I have one. What do you want of the ops area working group? What would you like this group to provide here? I guess my initial read of this is more in the research area. So what operationally are you looking for from this working group?
Yeah, well, we also talked about with the ADs and the chairs of the subnet and the security dispatch, and they thought our drafts is more about the practical security operation against the DDoS attack. So they recommend us to turn to the OPS domain to promote our drafts, and we wanted to seek for some valuable comments here. We also have no idea which work group is most suitable. Yeah.
So my read of this is, first of all, thank you for coming here and presenting it. The the IETF. Great. The second thing is that you want to standardize an architecture. For an architecture to be standardized, you need to gather interests from multiple people, right? This is from operators. You need to have people developing tools. You need to go to the hackathon because standardizing architecture is actually difficult.
Yeah.
So you went to Savnet, you went to Secret Dispatch, you're coming here. Maybe you want to go to NMRG, but the point is that unless you've got this community of people telling, yes, I want to work with you on this architecture, this is going to be difficult. So I believe that you're doing the right thing here, but you need to get more people.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mahesh here, and I think I wanted to share similar thoughts to the question that Joe was asking is, what do you need? And it seems like it's more an informational presentation in this working group, but really what we can do is, and I think what ideally you should be doing is, NMRG would be the right place, but I'm more than happy to talk to you about where this work should probably head.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Not threat surface management.
Okay, hello everyone. It's Frank Xia, Liang Xia from Huawei. And this time we bring two new drafts talking about the network device security posture modeling and related netconf yarn extension. So these two drafts are all co-authored and proposed by China South Power Grid and Huawei. Okay, so we will introduce the problem and our proposal. Okay, so some background. So of course, our general goal is that we want to reduce the network device security risk when it is used in the real network. So the so the general method, we have two ways. Firstly, of course, we should keep on to develop the more secured devices to increase its to develop a security feature, security function, and define security baseline and compliant and make our network, make our device more secure. Of course, this is the way we are always done. But another important way, from another aspect, we should finally we should want to increase our network device security and visibility. So how to achieve this? We can modeling the network status or network posture of the device, and then we collect and monitor it, and then we access it. So that is another important way we can to help. So these two drafts are all on this direction. So this specific draft is about how to monitor and manage the network devices threat surface. So what is threat surface? Here we give a rough definition. So which means that the interface or surface exposed to the network and may potentially be attacked by the adversaries. So if some adversary can take use of this exposed surface, interface or service and explore it, so it becomes a more serious attack surface, right? So as we all know that some well-known attack surface, for example, the insecure SMP v2 protocol, and it includes the weak algorithm, so MD5 and DS. So it some famous security accident is happened because of this. So how to manage it, how to monitor this? So this is our goal. So so we also noticed that there are some previous IETF work in the history that in this direction. So you can see that we have concluded the NIA working group and the second working group. They all on this direction and propose their framework, architecture, and the proposal, published the IFC. But they are concluded, and they have done some progress. And recently, we also noticed that there are some new IFC and working group draft from the OPSAWG talking about how to extend the MAD YARN model to monitor or to collect the SBON and vulnerability information or the TLS, DTLS configuration security profile from the device or IoT devices to monitor it and to access its security posture. So I think they are all the good work, and hopefully our work is another try on this direction. Okay, so this is the background. So talking about the real content of this this first one draft, actually it includes two parts. First part is that, of course, we should firstly define the model, the definition. What is the threat surface? What category or what specific information or attribute is included in this threat surface information model? So you can see in the about half of this page, we define several categories. The threat surface can include the interface exposure, the service exposure, the account exposure, and the vulnerability and the virtual information. And then based on this information model and definition, of course, we should, in IETF, we should define the concrete solution. So how to extend the netconf and the YARN to collect all this information from the device and then we can comprehensively access them. So I want to say that a lot of the this security threat surface information, like the security configuration, like the exposed interface, like the software, hardware, virtual information, they have all already defined in the existing IETF YARN data model. So most of them have already defined in existing YARN model. So that makes us easy. We don't need to redefine the new YARN data model, but we need to extend the netconf YARN netconf subtree filter or the PubSub mechanism. So collect all our interested or concerned information from the existing model. But we also think that maybe when this work going down, we will identify some new information or the running status of the device that is related to the network device threat surface that has not defined in current YARN data model. So maybe we need to propose new YARN data models. That's on the way. So I will give, so go back to the threat surface information model. I don't want to go into too much details, but I can give some example about the service exposure. So give you a better understanding of what it is. For example, the service exposure, it can include the insecure protocols, like the SMP v2 or Telnet, right? If the network device has running this service, so we should know and we should control it. For the weak service security configuration, for example, if for some service, we have the short password, we have the weak algorithms, we have some default setting, and this default setting can be easily guessed by the adversary. So all this kind of information, we need to monitor, we need to collect and access. So that's some example, but you can see our draft, we have more detailed definition. Okay, so this is all about this first draft. Oh, I need to go quick. So the second draft is about, it's another aspect. It's closely related, but this draft is about the device's security configuration, modeling, and its netconf YARN extension, how to collect and manage them. This is also co-authored by the China South Power Grid and Huawei. And I can skip this background. It's very similar, but the general idea, I want to say that here, maybe you think that this security configuration is a little similar like the previous one. But in general, we think that these are two aspects to consider how to monitor or how to access a network device security posture. So right now we still write two drafts and to describe these two part of it. Maybe in the future they can converge or they have some overlap. We should carefully design about this. But let me give a quick introduction of this part. So I think it's easily understand that the security configuration include a lot of parts. So we need to collect them, and then we have a baseline, and then we can compare and to judge whether this current device security configuration is good or not, or something we need to fix, right? So this is a very simple idea. So here we give some very easy understand, and we some three top high-risk configuration items, like the default password, like the unnecessary open the port, like insecure protocol and the algorithms. So all this we need to monitor. Okay. And the basic method is the same. We should firstly define the information model and the definition. Then based on this, we extended the netconf, or we use the current netconf mechanism to collect them and to retrieve them on time, by subscribe and publication. Okay, so I think because it's our 0.0 draft, so it's very beginning stages. So right now, this time we just want to raise the problem and raise how to say the use case to maybe somebody some of our customer are interested, or maybe some of other vendors are interested. So if enough interest here, I think maybe we ask maybe this working group can consider, make this work here, and let's keep on. So we welcome more comments and collaboration. Thank you.
Any comments here? The mic? Yeah, I would be interested in seeing given some of the similarities to MUD, SACM, what this working group feels. Is this the appropriate place? I haven't seen that. I haven't seen much on the list yet, and I would like to gauge what the working group feels before we make any determination. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. John exposure of netconf and compute. Jordi.
Hi, this is Jordi and from Qualcomm, and this work is done in collaboration with Luis, Sabine, and Roland. Okay, so I guess so. We presented this work a couple of IETF ago, maybe 2-3 IETFs ago. Just to recap and set the context of the conversation. The context of this conversation is about exposure of infrastructure information, about communication and computation properties, and using this information to help make informed decisions on how to place communication and computational workloads over a distributed compute system that is interconnected over a network, for instance, at the edge. And so while the standardization protocol interfaces to expose network information is quite mature, it lags behind for computation information. So we'd like to bring out the topic of how to characterize computation information and how to expose it to make these informed decisions on how to place the workloads. So there's a need to define a compute model and a set of compute metrics to support various use cases that are being discussed. Some work exists in the IETF, in particular the CATS working group is working on a specific use case, which is traffic steering to do computational node selection. And then also Alto has done work in the past on characterization of communication cost and exposure of such information. And then, sorry for the typo, OPSAWG has some RFC also, I think 9 years ago, on characterization of compute resources for virtual machines. Computational metrics have also been defined in other bodies, Linux Foundation, the MTF, ETSI, NFV, and we think it would be relevant to have this conversation also in the IETF to accommodate for a set of important use cases. Okay, just the way we phrase the problem space is based on this service life cycle. So you have a new service that you want to deploy. The first step is you deploy the service. So for deploying the service, you need to know where are the computational nodes, how is what are the communication properties that interconnects the nodes to make that service placement done in an informed way. After you deploy the service, then you start running the instances, and then you do service selection. And that usually involves two decisions, selecting the node at which you connect to, because that service could be replicated. And for load balancing considerations, you need to select the right computational node, as well as the path to get to that node. And thirdly, you have a service assurance component to this problem space to guarantee the performance of the system, whether it's on the service deployment stage or the service selection. In this table, we also showed what kind of information is needed for each of these stages and who needs it. And the players here are the service provider, the service and application provider, as well as the network provider. Currently, we have, I mentioned CATS is working on a specific use case from this problem space. Mostly 2A and 2B are taken care by the CATS working group, service selection, basically computational node selection, and path selection. But no work is done on the service placement nor service assurance. And that's kind of a gap here that we're trying to cover with this draft. Okay, the problem space itself has two main components. One is a definition of the compute model and the compute metrics. And secondly, definition of the protocol interfaces to expose the metrics to the consumer. So these are kind of orthogonal problems. I'm going to talk about one and then the other briefly. On the first problem, definition of metrics and the model. This is based on the current conversation that's happening in the CATS working group. Kehan et al. Have a draft there that describe this approach, and we're going to be talking about this also in tomorrow's session at the CATS working group. The idea is to have something simple that achieves interoperability and scalability, basically, while providing something that is useful at the same time. And so you can imagine the model that's been proposed is you have at the lower level your infrastructure, communication, and compute nodes, providing raw metrics in terms of the capabilities of the systems, bandwidth, latency, GPU capabilities, CPU capabilities, storage, memory. These raw metrics then are called level 2 metrics, level 0 metrics. Then they are aggregated into level 1 metrics, which are kind of like buckets organized by the capability, basically, whether it's a network metric, compute metric, or a storage metric. These buckets then normalize the metric and provide a score. So at this point, the metric is unitless. So it could be a score from 1 to 5, depending on the performance of that resource, 5 being the highest, for instance. And then you would have yet another potential level of metrics, level 2, which would aggregate all the metric, all the sub-metrics, the level 1's metrics, and then provide a single unified score for further simplicity. So this provides kind of a trade-off between simplicity and information resolution in terms of the ability to know the actual performance of the systems, and aiming at for something that's simple for interoperability. I did an analogy here on how this works based on the university GPA system, basically. But yeah, in terms of the second problem, definition of the interface to expose the metrics, there's also some developments here. If you look at, for instance, at the CATS working group, the architecture has 3 different forms. Basically, one is a distributed architecture, another is centralized, and then you have a hybrid architecture. And based on these 3 different configurations, you would have 3 different ways to distribute the metrics, to expose the metrics to the necessary network nodes. So if it's a distributed architecture, then you would have a distributed way to distribute the metrics. If it's a centralized, then you would have a central point where you convey the metrics and then do the aggregation, and then the agents could query that centralized point to get the metrics. And then you could also have a hybrid system where some of the metrics are distributed and some are centralized. This trade-off basically is the optimal choice depends on the dynamicity. So the higher frequency metric updates tend to favor a centralized collection approach for scalability and vice versa. And then a couple of examples for decentralized approach. There's a couple of drafts here mentioned, one from CATS, one from 5G Edge Service, proposing using BGP for distribution mechanism. And then for a centralized approach, we could leverage work done in the past from Alto, which provides an Alto server that could aggregate these metrics. Okay, and so what is the idea? I mean, the idea is that some of this work is being picked up by the CATS working group, but we see that that has a very narrow scope. So we want to keep that conversation alive in terms of the broader problem, set of use cases that we know that, or we think that eventually need to be supported. So I don't think there's a rush on this, and we're thinking to go bottom up in terms of the approach, focusing first on CATS, but keeping the big picture in mind would be relevant. So briefly, consumers of computer information can be several-fold and located at different levels. And so the set and the scope of applicable metrics is also several-fold. And then these compute metrics are being defined in several bodies, as mentioned. But this calls for a common framework to specify the standardized metrics. And within that, potentially OPSAWG could be an appropriate venue to discuss this broader set of use cases. Okay, this final slide has a proposed roadmap that I think we're going to be discussing tomorrow in the CATS working group. You can see that some of the elements are being taken care of within the CATS working group. So there are potentially 3 documents here. 2 are on CATS. One of them is on the definition of metrics. There's a milestone there for delivering this document on for March 25. So that's the main priority right now. There is potential another document discussing how to expose these metrics, and there are already, as mentioned, some drafts looking at things like BGP and such. And then there's a potential 3rd document that we don't think we want to maybe like work on it right now, but that could provide guidance on the overall picture, because we don't want to miss the overall picture in terms of the use cases and such. And this document could help drive the design. There's a question of where does this document belong to, and so I think having this conversation in OPSAWG for now could help drive some of these. But again, the thinking is to go bottom up for now, focusing on CATS, while keeping the big picture and see where these other set of use cases that we think will need to be handled belong to. So I think that covers my presentation. Are there any questions? Or?
Questions? I'm seeing in the queue. Oh, no, go first. Go first. I like the bottoms-up approach. I do wonder, though, just, and maybe I'm just thinking of mud because it happened recently. If there's the interest is in CATS right now, if there will be enough interest in OPSAWG to do some of what you're proposing here versus having more of a concentration of interested people in the CATS working group, even for the bigger picture thing. I'm just not as chair, just off the top of my head thought. But I think what you're doing initially seems like the right approach, and seems to be within the charter of CATS. That's just my gut reaction.
This is Hao Mei Huawei. Thank you for this work, and unfortunately I didn't read the document, but this presentation is really useful. I have 2 comments. One is about the scope. So we have those kind of terms for compute for network or network for compute. So could you clarify which is closer to this work?
Sorry, could you?
Sorry, can you hear? Yeah, okay. So the first question is, could you clarify the scope of this document or this work? Is it closer to compute for network or network for compute? So computer is something within the operation, network operation, right?
Yeah, the scope would be management of workloads that require both communication and compute resources. And one clear use case is at the edge, but these workloads could go all the way to the cloud. Yeah, that's the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit more network for compute. And second is a quite small comment. So when you talk about the level 1 to start one, so I would like to maybe differentiate the term a little bit, because when you say L1 network, there is misleading to maybe TDM switching or whatever. So I like the way to make it a hierarchical, but please try to have another term, and
okay,
we will come to you offline.
Thanks.
One more question on my side. So first of all, I believe this is an interesting topic that will have to be solved at some point in time somewhere. Now, I didn't read your draft. Sorry, remember I'm the newbie chair, right? So, but I was going through the table of content. I was wondering if in your document in OPSAWG, you have other metrics to be standardized, because and I could not find any. If I look at your slides there, it says that the metric definition will be happening in CATS, which is about steering. Is there any other things that you need except, steering metrics that you would need from this working group? If the answer is no, maybe, you know, as Joe was saying, you want to get like the interesting people do the job in CATS. If there is more than just the CATS metrics, maybe there is something here. Just first reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a very relevant question because we don't want to kind of lose the bigger picture. And that's a question that we also ask ourselves. I think the idea is that whatever decision we make in terms of the architecture, the model, that it has to be able to scale to other potential use cases. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you look at this architecture, it's fairly generic, right? So there's nothing specific about here about the steering or anything. So from that standpoint, we feel good that this can accommodate for a broader set of use cases. And so the idea is that to have this conversation, to not lose the bigger picture at the same time, right? So whatever we do in CATS has to be focused on CATS, but at the same time, making sure that the architecture, the model can accommodate.
So whatever you do in CATS will remain in CATS, but based on architecture that could be here, right? So I'm just asking the question at this point in time. I'm not giving any advice, right?
Hi, Adrian Farrell, CATS co-chair. Yeah, I like the what you do in CATS stays in CATS. The way CATS came at this was in order to do traffic steering, you've got to know what the metrics are. There was nobody specifying metrics or even really a framework for defining those metrics. So CATS has jumped in to do that. It is only the compute metrics in order to steer the traffic, because that's our scope. It may turn out they are more applicable in other scopes. And had somebody else done that already, we would be using it. If we need to come to some agreement where it's generalized and put in a different working group, that's going to be fine. But where we are today, just like on that last slide, is the bulk of the work is being done in CATS. And what I heard was that this draft is going to be considerably reshaped, reorganized to be a more general framework for these are the ways you might use compute metrics to do various things, but not actually specifying the metrics themselves.
Very good. So this is the best outcome that you would like to get out of this. So what do you ask the OPSAWG? That we participate, that we review, that we think about the next use case for the architecture and take them into account? What do you expect from this group?
Yeah, all those really. Yeah, please come to CATS, please review the CATS documents, please help shape them. And then if and when you see wider applicability or more general frameworks to be done, then knock yourselves out.
So would it be reasonable that at each OPSAWG meeting, you present this with the updates to see if it's still in line with what we could be doing here? Is this a good outcome?
So hang on, this is not a CATS document.
Right, fair enough.
So what happens in Ops Area Working Group stays in Ops Area. Whether or not you continue to discuss this document is up to you. If you would like CATS to give you a status periodically, then just ask and we're happy. I mean, even Med is here.
I'm trying to see, let's say in a year from now, assuming that we accept this, there's dependency between CATS metrics and how they're using the architecture. I'm trying to picture in my head how this could be working. So just asking the questions at this point in time. So
yeah, I mean, clearly we've got to continue talking to each other. That would.
Oh, again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The intent-based security management automation for cloud-based security services and COIN. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Hello, this is John Perzo. Today I will introduce two kinds of topic. One is interface to network security function I2NSF, and the other one is interface to in-network function I2INF. Next slide. Oh, this one. Okay. So basically, the I2NSF work, Adrian was the previous chair, Linda also a co-chair. So we concluded this working group for interface for cloud-based and edge-based security services. So we finished the major young data models, but we need still two draft left for intent-based networking based on the NMRG, RFC 9315. So the first one is security managed automation. The second one is analytics interface. So this one is academically we prove concept. So we published two magazine paper in terms of cloud-based security service system. The second one is also we prove concept through the multiple hackathon project in IETF. So we show the closed loop security service. So basically, these two draft explain. So we have a closed loop control. So in order to that, we collect NSF, network security function like a firewall web filter. So monitoring data is collected by this analyzer and then performing machine learning, and then we can take action. So in order to that, we need the analytics interface. So that is a missing part. And the other one is the I2NSF framework. They don't have this kind of analyzer, also analytics interfaces. So I want to ask the OPSAWG whether have this kind of extension is interesting you guys or not. So that is my first business today. The secondly, also my group, we tried to make a new working group initially. So this one is related to OPSAWG. I shortly introduce. I tried to get some attention or support from you guys. Okay, so interface to in-network function is for standardized the framework and the interface for the programmable network devices like a people switch. So the basic goal is we try to register the capability of in-network function with controller, and then we try to provision the service like some computing in network coin services. So this afternoon 3 p.m. we will have a side meeting. So please come to this side meeting and then please give us your valuable comment. So this one is the one typical example. So you can see we have edge cloud top and left side we have a central cloud, and also the SDN controller and the switch, they are providing virtualized the network system. So our goal is we try to configure SDN controller, and then we can provide some VNF consensus failure detector for SDN controller and reliable broadcast for multimedia services. Next one is we try to extend the previous our experience for I2NSF. So we try to more generalized consider in-network functions. So if this both, we try to make a both first, and then we can make a new working group to provide the in-network function, considering the AI function also. So we compare the two things, I2NSF, I2INF. I2NSF is for security, even though I2NSF focus on security, but our framework interface is more likely management operation rather than security protocol itself. So that's why I try to bring these two draft to OPSAWG. And the other hand, I2INF is also related to operation management, but this one is more likely some edge cloud management. I believe Catch working group also I believe is relevant to this new work. So the next step is I would like to ask I2NF2 draft, adopted by OPSAWG, try to work on that, and then we try to complete I2NSF framework and interfaces for in that IBM sport. And also The other I2 INF case, please give us your valuable feedback. That's it. Thank you. So any comment or question?
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I was actually, the presentation helped me a little bit with what you're asking, because it sounded like initially you wanted a more dedicated working group or BOF focus on your in-network function, and now you're saying here in Ops Area Working Group you would like feedback. I mean, obviously, fine. You've posted this to the list, and people can provide feedback. But is your ultimate intent to? And here comes Mahesh. Maybe he can help demystify some of this. Is your ultimate intent to get a dedicated working group focused on some of this in-network function and intent-based networking?
Mahesh, I wish I could provide clarity. I'm equally confused at this point. Is your ask that people review your document in this working group, but your ultimate objective is to form a new working group?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this table, you can see the first one is I2 NSF. We have the two remaining draft. That case, I want get help from this working group to standardize. Okay, that is my first request. Secondly, I2 INF case new. I try to make a new working group based on but that one is relevant to OPSAWG. So I try to get some feedback. So my business, the main business is I2 NSF. Try to standardize two draft. So I mentioned the slide. We have here link, right? So two draft, right? Two draft. The I2NS framework, security management, automation, and the analytic interface. I try to standardize this draft mainly. Okay.
And you want to do that in this working?
Yeah, because this is related to management and operation for security framework. So
okay.
That is main. I2NF is just for information for you guys. Okay. Just to get feedback or support.
Okay. I guess
Well,
that.
yeah, we can continue to watch what the feedback is on the list and get people to discuss this to see if we have that interest here in Ops Area Working Group, especially around the I2 NSF because of it was from a concluded working group already.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you, Joe. Yeah.
Okay. This is going to be a little interesting. We did have Michael Richardson on tap for the PCAP update. He is doing some interviews with Nomcom. He might not be here until 20 after, which is our ops area portion. So we're going to see what happens. But right now we're going to hand things over to, ops area since we're out of topics and ops area working group. So Mahesh and Warren, if you want to come up here and kick us off. Thank you for the first part of Ops Area Working Group. We may be back in a few minutes. Okay, yeah, we might be back. So, but you're the guest of honor. Oh. Okay, so for the Ops Area section, the biggest thing we had on the agenda was a NIMOps update consisting of experiences from LACNOG, where Benoit went, NANOG, where I think Chin is going to give an update, and just some general IAB feed. Oh, and RIPE, I'm sorry. So you people.
All right. So the idea, as we said in the last meeting, is that we would have an IAB workshop called Next Era of Network Management. So part of the program committee, we've got the ADs, we've got Matt and myself, because we're part of the Net and MOP working group, in which there is like an entry telling we want to consider the RFC 3545 bis, which is like 20 years ago, which is a list of requirements and recommendation. So knowing that it's difficult to get operators feedback, operators coming to the IETF to give feedback, we reached out to multiple places. So what we want out of this is a workshop on December 3rd, 5th, 3 days, 3rd to 5th for 3 hours a day. It's based on paper that you could contribute, and if you could have maybe the chat in the chat window, the link to NEMAPS. So it's the background. So part of the reach out effort, I went to LACNOC, Latin America NOC. So high level feedback there was first of all a kind of language barrier. Obviously with my French, but also because people mainly speak Spanish and Portuguese there. The second thing is that I would not tell that we had the biggest operators in the room, but mainly smaller operators and not always the technical people for these operators. We had also a lot of universities. So when I presented, introduced the workshop, I didn't get much feedback directly. I get some feedback afterwards from smaller operators, and no offense here, just a fact, right? And from universities that they're not really deploying something like netconf or resconf or yang, but they're thinking, and it comes with the scale of it, right? If you don't have many routers to manage, CLI could still be the right way. We establish 1 or 2 connections with universities because I think this is a strong enabler. If you introduce the student to new technologies, you get them into the toolings, get them in the hackathon. I ask a specific question to both LACNOC and RIPE. Who knows about the IETF? Some people knew and who were participating, not that much. Now let's come to RIPE. By the way, one of the good thing I'm hoping is that with all the contacts, we're going to have much more survey inputs. And in the survey, we're asking questions about, what do you use right now? If you don't use the latest one, the latest technologies, why, etc. Coming to RIPE, I asked the same question about who knows about the IETF. Well, way more people, and there were a lot of familiar faces over there. Who works the IETF? Yes. By the way, I asked who knows what the IEB is in both LACNOC and IETF. LACNOC, basically no ID. RIPE, a little bit more. Because I try to position this as it's an IETF workshop, not making distinction between ISG, IEB, which is like internal stuff. I explained it because Maria was there in RIPE. So feedback from RIPE. Again, not that much feedback during the session itself because it was only 30 minutes. A series of good discussions on automations, but it's automation at all level. At the same time, we speak about coherent optics. At the same time, we speak about details of Yang, why it doesn't work. At the same time, this is automation broadly. So I don't have like a good conclusions from the discussions, but I'm hoping a lot from the survey. Now, if someone wants to say something about NANOC, because in NANOC it was special, please come Warren, Mahesh, Chin. And why are you coming here? It was special because there was a half an hour introduction of the workshop and then a 1 hour and a half of discussion specifically on this topic. So feel free.
Chen will do the talk and I just stand it.
Okay, yeah. So thanks, Pamela, said background for this discussion. Actually, Ken and I joined with Warren, we make a trip to the NANOC, and so it's kind of adventure, for me. And so actually compare with, NANOC, actually I see, NANOC is kind of larger community. Actually, we, have 2 presentation in NANOC meeting. Actually, one is targeted to, general session and have 30 minutes to introduce, what this IB workshop is about, and what is the history and what we want to looking for, from this NANOC community. And but we also have a breakout session. Very thankful to this NANOC program community. Sort of arrangement. We have breakout session with more than 50 people, room size, maybe more than that. And we got a a lot of people actually, a very good discussion to receive the feedback. So for the breakout session, first we actually introduce, we have online surveys to try to introduce how people can, fill out this IB survey. In addition, actually, we focus on, general question for the survey feedback. Actually, for this survey question, actually, we got a lot of discussion. I think many actually from operator. I also see many familiar face, from IETF, and some from vendor actually. So so it's a good discussion. Actually we in the breakout room we have already recorded all this, but we just translate into some kind of transcript. So actually high level feedback that struck me a lot is is IETF, we focus on device level young data model. This seems not enough. So in addition to standardize this device young data model, we also need to look at tuning. And second, high level points is in addition for device level API, we also need to look at open API and library and softwareization and how these can put together to build the fully automated system. And so also people are very interested for some vendor specific model can fill some gap actually to really to make a really automate the whole management system. So that's what I get. All right.
I mean, Chin covered most of it, but a couple of very quick, wow, there we go, a couple of very quick extra updates. Something which I think we heard a fair bit was especially smaller networks have a very hard time getting started with our tooling. There's still a bunch of them using CLIs or SNMP just because it's really hard for them to figure out how I actually get started if I've got 5 routers, 10 routers, that sort of stuff. And then also a substantial number of people still seem to be using SNMP largely for the same reason. If you're like, why aren't you using the IETF stuff yet? Either they're using OpenConfig or they kept saying they're not good libraries, or they had a library, but it no longer works. So we can somehow manage to get more open source people involved and or more sort of how you get started. If you've been managing stuff from a CLI, what do you actually need in order to start using our tooling? Slow walkthrough. You're looking as though I've gone nuts. But yeah, slow walkthrough, generic tutorial from knowing nothing to actually getting started with Yang.
In addition, I want to add, just yesterday, actually, all the, NEMOps, program committee member get together to discuss, what is the next step actually. So for this, feedback we connected from Nanlog and Naknog, actually, we need to, make a summary actually, to translate into some position paper and to make it provide as an input to the, IB workshop. So also for the IB workshop will be extended to November 17th, also for the survey feedback. So still, people feel free to, contribute and, provide your input. Yeah.
And I forgot to mention, Chin is on the IAB and on the program committee for this workshop. So he's the right person.
And just to quickly amplify what Chin said, the workshop is invitation only. If you want to be invited, send an expression of interest, send in a position paper, do it soon, or you might run out of space. So start right now.
Mahesh, actually, this is a question for Binma, Warren, and Chen, because you were there talking to customers. When they talk about tooling, I don't know if you were able to zoom in on the question of exactly what does it mean from a tooling perspective? Because I imagine that they're either referring to something they already use, which would be a good place for us to figure out that maybe a tool similar to that, but for Yang is what we need to develop.
Yep, we did actually ask that in person, but we've also asked it in the survey. And so we've asked things like, are you using SNMP? Are you using NetConf? Are you using RESTconf? But also, are you using Ansible? Are you using HP OpenView? Things like that. Because a lot of times people use a tool and they don't actually know what is
True.
being used under the hood.
Exactly.
So we have that in the survey, but we haven't done enough analysis yet. I will note that a lot of people are still using SNMP. And when you poke them and sort of ask why, they're like, I installed Nagios and it automatically came with it. So that just worked for me. I think if we want more people to use this, it should be the default in more open source tools. So if you install Libre NMS, instead of using SNMP, it will use Yang, netconf, etc.
To answer your question, one more piece of feedback is that in LACNOC, a lot of people work with open source, right? It's not like maybe in Europe or somewhere else where they want to buy a product. So they want to, they buy the entire trajectory of Yang and service model and assurance and where we want to go, and not inventory and not digital map, but CMAP, right? They buy all this, but they're telling, okay, where do I start? I want to play with it. And then we don't have like a good set, oh, you download this package and it works. And I would still see like NMRG type of graph, MRTG type of graph, cacti on slides in LACNOC. Because it's there, it works for monitoring, configuration, CLI.
Yeah.
I mean, just to follow up from what Benoit said, the IETF NOC still uses MRTG style graphs and Libre NMS and stuff because we've tried the alternative and it was like banging our head against a wall. Maybe I should reword that in a slightly better way. It wasn't as easy as it could have been.
We do use some Yang. The wireless stuff has some Yang to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what that kind of tells me is that yes, tooling, open source tooling especially, is key. But I think what Benoit seems to also be referring to is that they need to be packaged together. Whatever set of tools we are going to suggest need to be packaged together in a way that they can deploy kind of out of the box.
Out of the box, but also to follow the kind of vision that we have. Play with Yang. Replace your MRTG to see if it works. Go with config. Go with this. So what they need is like, they see the journey, they're missing the first 3 steps.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, Wim, for registering and entering the queue.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't. Sorry about that. Yeah, I forgot to register. I'll register. Yeah, my name is Wim Hendricks from Nokia. So I was in NANOC. I mean, I gave one of the feedbacks. So I wanted to, 2 important things that I wanted to highlight. One is, I think there is not really a discussion on device level interface to the device. And of course, there is still SNMP, and then we are evolving to Yang more and more, right? So I think there's no discussion. What I wanted to highlight is that from the moment you go up, there is a huge tooling that is not built on IETF Yang-based systems that we also have to acknowledge, right? So I think I wanted to clarify that is that there is if you look to the developer ecosystem above the device model, there is a huge ecosystem out there that is not based on Yang at all, right? And the question I think you have to ask in that workshop, and I submitted that as one of the responses, is that what is IETF going to do with it, right? Because today in IETF, we de facto say Yang is the way to do data modeling. Whereas if you look to the outside world, that is not the reality. I'm not saying that's the reality at all. I mean, that's not the reality as a global, let's say, implementation environment, right? And so that, I think, is an important aspect that we have to what does IETF do with that? Right? Do we acknowledge that? Do we endorse it? Do we say no? I mean, that's one of the key things that you probably in the workshop, I would recommend zooming in onto that, right? The second thing, I mean, when it comes to tooling, one is open source toolings, which basically use tools like MRTG and stuff like that, but it's also, for example, generate Python bindings, Go bindings, Rust bindings. That's a starting point to consume your systems, right? So, and then there's the next level of tooling. So you basically have a layer of consumption systems that are being used for it. For example, there is tools out there that generate open API spec from a Pydantic model or from a Go structure, right? So that makes it easy for people to basically even define an information model, right? So today we don't have that type of tooling either for Yang, right? So there is a tooling to generate the information model, there is tooling to consume the information model, and then there is, so you have to layer that up in the whole stack, right? So I think that's, I wanted to clarify a bit the landscape, what I meant when I said the tooling around it. That is, I see that in 3 layers. One is generating information model. 2 is consuming information models in, let's say, automation libraries. And I just called out Python and Go, but there is Ansible, there is Terraform, there is a whole bunch of other sites. And then there is the layer on top, right? So that's for me the 3 classifications that I personally see to zoom in on.
Yeah, and a very quick sort of follow on from that. Things we also heard was it's really hard to find the models and like get all the models put together in a way that they'll work. But then also having things like a Python library is great. But if it doesn't survive the Python 2 to Python 3 transition, or if there's a Python, if there's a module library and somebody doesn't maintain it, then that's worse than not having it at all, because suddenly your system stops and you're having a bad day.
And one quick last comment. I believe you're right. So the objective of this workshop is to make sure to understand if we did a good job 22 years ago, because this workshop 22 years ago that started the entire data modeling thing. So there is one part of the workshop which is like, how did we do? And there is like future. And personally, I believe that we focus a bit too much on just configuration and Yang, because there is way more, as you mentioned, at different levels. Thank you. So we've got like 5 minutes to come back to OPSAWG for Michael, if it's fine with you, unless you want to say something else.
Oh, great. I didn't see Michael.
Should I slide?
Yeah.
I, for one, welcome our new Yang overlords. So 3 documents. PCAP link types is the one that we're trying to progress first. It's a standards track document that creates a registry for link types. PCAP itself, which is the classic 1987 era thing from Van Jacobs-Arilli, it will go straight to historic. Doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means we're not really going to ever add to it in some sense. And PCAP-NG, which is what you get from Wireshark and a few other things today. I hate the name. Please suggest a better name. Would go to informational in the end because we don't really have enough change control at this point in this process, but we could do another version if we needed to. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have about 301 inherited definitions. They're vaguely first come, first serve. We tried as a TCP dump group to basically, ask for good reference, stable references, but we didn't insist on it. And in the new document, we have a specification required area, and we have a first come, first served area. The entries vary in qualities. Some of them probably are unimplementable at this point, but we would not want to, we don't even know which ones they are. People have gone away, people have come there. There's some that are in common use. Some of the authors in the document would like to improve it better. I believe that better is the enemy of good enough here. One thought is actually to swap the 2 areas so that the 301 would essentially not be in the specifications required area, but in the first come, first served area, which may set the quality standard better for things. And so if you think about that. Next slide, please. So effectively, this document is just a big long thing that initializes the IANA registry. It looks like this at the top. It's too wide. I spoke to the RPC and the IANA yesterday together. I said, how can we fix this? One of the suggestions a few months ago was, why don't we just leave this in GitHub and have them the document point at it? And they said, no, we don't like that. Okay, at all. I said, would you like us to change it to stanzas like that? That will be more readable for us, okay? And they're like, yeah, you can do that. That would be okay. They also told me to come back and talk to them today, I guess, after they've thought about it over some margaritas or something. At least that conversion would be a mechanical, I don't know, I probably can write it faster in awk than Perl. Yeah, I mean, we'll just reformat that and do it that way. And IANA says they don't really care. They'll take it one way. And it could be that what's in the document is not, like, we can hand them XML they kind of would prefer that, but they can also derive it. So that's the kind of thing. This is a really good description, actually, this one, if you like that. And that's probably, I would say, one of the higher quality ones. Well, it doesn't actually tell you anything. It says, go read this spec, and it tells you that it's always padded and something like that. And that's enough usually to implement a link type. And that's really about it, right? We've been kind of in this holding pattern, partly my fault, but also I think the working group just needs to say quite clearly, you know, do this, and some suggestions, but not always, not really commands, I guess. I need commands. Command me, right? That's about it.
I think Vienna's okay. I mean, the last thing we were at, there was a working group last call. I made the comment because Mahesh made the comment about GitHub, but if Vienna wants it this way, I think that we can do that and we can start moving this forward.
Okay, I will go talk to them at, you know, whenever I find them today. They'll tell me what they tell me, and I will report that to the working group. And I would, you know, please take a look. PCAP NG is probably quite far from working group last call. And as I said, I hate any names with NG in it, and several other people do. One person suggested LG for last generation instead of next generation. I don't know about that, but anyway, I'm happy to call it Fred or Petunia or whatever, right? But I just hate the name NG. It's 15 years ago we did NG, so it's not next generation in any, you know.
Well, I think if we do progress this, it would be great to get people's renewed reviews of whatever it's called, to see where it's at, and I will commit to doing a review of that as well.
And I'll just say that someone had a really neat application where they took log files and captures from 6 different locations, merged them together into a PCAP NG, and then we're able to see the time sequence diagram, time sequence of all the logs going back and forth with the packets interspersed. And I was just like, wow, like that would make our life so much easier, wouldn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Let's go have lunch.
Yeah, Michael said it best. Thank you all. Hope to see you in Bangkok, and enjoy the rest of IETF.